China has revealed its new 7-man Politburo Standing Committee and, as widely predicted, has confirmed Xi Jinping's elevation to the Communist Party's top position. The new leader says China faces severe challenges in the coming decades, including corruption and being out of touch with the people. The head of the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, Bates Gill, joins us now on this once-in-a-decade day. He's the former director of the Northeast Asian Policy Studies Centre at the Brookings Institution in Washington. Bates, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Tell us, who is Xi Jinping and what kind of leader is he likely to be?
Xi Jinping is known as a princeling. That is to say, he's the son of a revolutionary hero. He has risen through the ranks as a governor and leader of many of the more wealthy eastern provinces. He's been a part of the Standing Committee of the Politburo now for, I think, about 4 or 5 years. And so he's been groomed in that role to where he arrives today. Beyond that, there's not a lot known about him amongst, everyday people, even in China.
Something we do know about him, though, is that his father was a revolutionary who was purged, if you like, in China, and so as a child Xi Jinping was forced to go and do hard labour in one of the poorest provinces of China. So he's lived with the elite in China, but he's also lived with the poorest. How will that background shape what kind of leader he will be?
It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of people of his generation went through the same sort of circumstances, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, and they all emerged from that experience in different ways. I wouldn't attribute to him necessarily, because of that experience, that some way or another he's going to be a major reformist or try to change China in a different way. One thing we can be pretty clear is he doesn't want China to go back to that type of Maoist revolutionary era, that's for sure.
So are there any signs he could be a reformer?
Possibly. I mean, we always have hopes when you have a new person coming in. His training might lead him to be a little bit more open-minded. Also, he has a good bit of foreign experience. At least he's traveled abroad more so than, say, his predecessor Hu Jintao did before reaching this position. But it's very opaque. It's hard to know.
But he talks about severe challenges, that China faces severe challenges. Doesn't that hint that he knows that there's going to have to be change?
Sure. I mean, I was struck that in his very first speech as the head of the Chinese Communist Party, he underscores in 2 or 3 paragraphs this problem of corruption, the need to be upstanding. I think just facing very squarely the fact that the party is under real assault right now among the people because of all the corruption and all the wrongdoings that is known in the press and openly. So they certainly know that this is a problem, but the problem is dealing with it. That is really the problem they face.
Isn't there just a remote possibility that this will be the last time that this mysterious change of power occurs, that the next time it may have at least a degree of democratic process?
We won't know for 10 years if it continues on in this normal cycle. I mean, there's some greater openness to it, we could say. I mean, let's face it, the selection of Mao as the leader, the selection of Deng Xiaoping, even the selection, say, of Jiang Zemin, was far more opaque and unknown. I mean, we've known that Xi Jinping was going to be the leader for some time now, along with 2 or 3 of the others that have reached this standing committee role. But I think it's too soon to guess that it might be.
They could learn a lot from the Vatican and the way that they elect
no white
Pope.
smoke, at least.
Increasingly, the leadership does position itself as public figures. I've been in China where they stand up and they wave to the crowd, and they try to look a bit more.
They
like,
meet the press.
Yes,
they actually have press conferences.
Yes, and they're more like the stars that they see in the West. But do you think that the reason they talk about democracy is what they're really trying to say is we need to find, corruption. We need to find a way of dealing with corruption that does not involve democracy. That is our challenge.
Their biggest challenge is dealing with corruption because it so corrodes the legitimacy of the party, which is already under real problems anyway. And yes, of course, they want to deal with it without true openness and transparency. Now, how do you square that circle? Very difficult.
Did he mention climate change? I would have thought that's one of their bigger problems.
It was only a 10-minute sort of speech to the nation, And he did not, as I recall. Although I think he does note that among the problems that people face and they're concerned about is environmental deterioration. But he didn't mention
And a lot of that in China is the water, isn't it? And the rivers and pollution.
What they've done
as
to
well
their
as
own
climate
environment.
change.
Groundwater is severely
Shocking.
tainted. There's a
Sky.
severe drying of the lands, of the formerly arable lands in the north. It's a big, big challenge.
What about the Politburo Standing Committee? What do we know about them, who were appointed today, the 7-person, down from 9? I don't know why that was,
Right.
but what do we know about that? Who's on the committee and why it has been shrunk?
Again, back to the opacity problem. I mean, other than the first 2 gentlemen who walked out, and again, all men, and only a very remote possibility that one of those persons would have been a woman. The remaining 5, I mean, there was a lot of betting pools and sweeps going on all over the China-watching world about who those other 5 were going to be, and we did not know until they walked out that door. Now, some interesting persons. The number 3 person in the pecking order, Wang Qishan. Many of those who are hoping for reform, hoping for a little bit more assertiveness in dealing with the big economic and socioeconomic problems were quite in favor of this person emerging. He was noted by many of his counterparts. He's sort of the level of Treasury Secretary would be. Noted by a lot of his counterparts around the world as a real problem solver. So maybe that's a signal that some of these problems can get tackled.
And when we talk about corruption, what kind of corruption are we talking about? Are we talking about the kind of low level where people are getting chucked off their land for the purposes of
The
economic
Eddie
growth?
O'Bead alleged.
We're talking about money.
It's a lot of issues. I mean, it happens at the level of petty corruption, where, you know, to get anything done, to get at the head of the queue to make sure your mother can see a doctor, you know, to make sure that you can get a license for your restaurant, you know, that sort of corruption. But then it goes up much beyond that, where officials in the countryside, for example, will simply expropriate land in order to sell over to a major developer and take a huge cut in the process. And that's probably one of the most common challenges in terms of the corruption, is that just common everyday people are losing their homes, losing their land, you know, being pushed off in favor of officials enriching themselves.
I look forward to a new era in China where there'll be democracy and super PACs.
I enjoy your optimism. I lost a bet that they would put a woman in the Politburo. Clearly, I have no China knowledge at all. Why not? Half the sky, still not ready.
There was one. Well, if you go beyond these 7, then there's something called the Politburo itself, which is about 20 or 25 people. I'm not sure the exact number. Even in that number, only 1 woman. Why that is, I don't know. I suppose it could be that for whatever reason they're not being properly groomed or given offered opportunities at lower levels in order to rise to this high level. I find it very strange. I think one thing that the Chinese could do, quite honestly, to improve their soft power image globally would be to have a major female figure.
Which is why I took the bet that they would put 1 in. But clearly, half the sky, not quite yet.
Not at all.
Paul Keating, we were discussing earlier, and his views about a proper approach to China and the United States. Any hint thus far about whether this will be a more military, assertive administration?
I don't think there's much hint of it, and the reason is that one reason is that these new leaders will take some time to get their footing. Recall that this new fellow's 2 predecessors, Hu Jintao and the one before that, Jiang Zemin, are still alive, still working behind the curtain to make sure their legacy, their family, their networks are promoted and given all the benefits. So because of that sort of manipulation, the new leader is going to take a year or 2 to really set himself up. And beyond that, quite honestly, I think the problems that China faces domestically are overwhelmingly going to be a structural constraint.
Well, one of the things he will oversee will be an end to the one-child policy, will it not?
Possibly, or at least I would say a phased, and that's already happening in many ways. Yeah. A phased change.
Okay, Bates, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us about it. It's a fascinating transition that's going on at the moment, and as I mentioned before, once in a decade it happens. That's all for the drum. Thanks very much to our panel, Prue Goward, Cassandra Wilkinson and Philip Adams. You can check out the website at abc.net.au/The Drum and join John and Chaz for Planet America, same time tomorrow night. I'll see you on Monday.